Hello Americans channel. This video is made by free videos from Storyblocks, and these images and video we use just for explanation, and it's free use also.
He never knew his life will be completely changed after finding something nobody expected to see. He started to investigate with intense interest, but did not even know that heading down the frightening tunnel implied that there would be no return. He kept going deeper down the tunnel even though the police officer and the realtor advised him not to. He was really curious about what was down there that he did not care what he could possibly find inside. Once Christopher's theory was finally completed, and then all the evidence was available, he came to know his only option is to get out and don't ever return. What precisely did he find when he began to explore his new place? That the only option available is to leave. What he discovered might really be terrifying, as one would not leave his or her home that easily, especially Christopher, who just spent a fortune for it. Not so long time ago, Christopher Wanless recently bought a new real estate. Laying down on 16.5 hectares of forest areas, he was delighted to ever own a place and piece of land. Unknown to him, he was just about to stumble on a gateway of some kind in his own land now. It does seem, however, that all this was what destiny had in store for him. For the first and only time, he visited his new estate and its surrounding environment. The climates were not smooth, and the external structures of the plants and trees were discarded. But that made the environment look much more beautiful. Christopher absolutely loved all the area, from both the bird songs to the quietness of the woodlands. It wasn't long before his feet started walking alone as his body and brain both moved into autopilot mode. Something managed to capture his interest unexpectedly. He was quite unsure of what could possibly happen, so he decided to go ahead and check it. While he was wandering around his land, Christopher saw something that caught his eyes instantly. He could not see it from where he was standing, so he decided to go near it and check it. It felt like he was in a kind of haze as he was approaching the object that caught his attention. Christopher described it as something dark and small. What do you think could it be? Initially, Christopher thought it was just a tree. An old small tree that is darker than the rest in the woodlands. However, when he finally came closer to the object, he found out that he was wrong. While he was approaching it, he could not help but feel so thrilled thinking what the object could be. To his surprise, he found himself falling down a 3-foot ditch. He was stunned by the fall that he made. He was covered with dirt and leaves. He started shaking it all off and had seen what lay ahead before him. What he had seen confused him. Did he uncover a mine on his estate? It looked neglected and ancient, assessing its own looks. He was forced to examine the mysteries of this fascinating structure. The outside of the mine was moss-like, and it was difficult to look in there anyway. He seemed to be excited to venture upon a grand journey and went back home and got a lamp which would allow him to see just what was hidden inside. He was very curious about this mine that he did not care at all if it is even safe to go near it. He doesn't even know what was waiting for him. Christopher recalled the situation he was in when he checked out the mine. He said, "When we bought the house, nobody ever told us about the fact that the estate had a lot of mines on it. We just sort of stumbled upon the gold mine one day, and that was it. When I first saw it, I was so excited that I almost fell over myself. The only thing that I could think about was Indiana Jones and underground railroads." At just that moment, he had no clue it really would be his disastrous choice to make ever. He did, however, return to the opening, already equipped with a flashlight. He held his breath and was greeted by some kind of sparkling thing on the walls inside. What was it? Is it possible that what he discovered was not just a mine, but an old gold mine? The walls were muddy and did look as if they would fall to the ground at any particular moment. His steps reverberated, and he could not help but think of the whole soil that pressed the structure down. He preferred to remain there for quite some time, and this was clearly apparent as he decided to take a flashlight and 3 fallback battery packs. He couldn't help but brush his hand all over the glittering stone material when he approached the surfaces. He thought, what if this was gold? He quickly forgot all this after he saw something which would immediately affect the outcome of this epic journey. If you are in Christopher's shoes, you will probably do the same thing as he did. The mine was chilly and kind of wet despite the actual temperature outside. He quickly realized that his footprints left 4-inch indentations on the ground. It looked as though there was a source of water because of freshwater pools in there. He's worried that he knew that stagnant pools of water could bring dangerous gases in locations such as this one. However, as he moved closer with the light directly out, he couldn't even see the end of the tunnel. He could well conclude that there was someone inside it or whatever else. And after that, he started to hear the tunnel mimicking strange sounds. Strangely, he began to follow the noise source, and he obviously didn't know this would be the wrong choice. There was really no air movement, no heat, and no shade as he walked down the tunnel. He managed to hold his flashlight tightly, actually nearly as if he had a battle blade. This time the sound grew louder. Somewhere along the way, he can hear the old mechanical parts and equipment. What could it be? He started to hear voices too. He also couldn't assume what they have said, but Christopher seemed to be brave enough just to scream, "Who is there?" His sound has been the only answer he obtained. Bravery stuffed him, and then he was motivated to see if anyone was there trying to hide. He still just won't give up the fight and is ready to go further into the tunnel. With all the steps he took, his shoes were now covered by water and mud. He saw a yellow air conditioning system, but somehow it did look as if it fell apart. There have also been chains that hung close to the ground, but they were all molded and rustled. This is something that Christopher was not expecting to see. What else will he find inside? Unexpectedly, Christopher felt very strange and began to feel that there has been weird energy back there. Something dragged him back, and he started feeling that he wasn't supposed to be in there. Nevertheless, he decided to pursue the water path to detect wherever it came from. Maybe that's where he discovers the voice sources. Could it be possible that someone else is living down there? The ambient temperature also seemed to suddenly drop all around me at this point, and I felt an even stronger negative presence ahead in the tunnel, Christopher said. When he did turn around and discovered light close to the entrance, he was about 150 feet into the passageway. He was already pretty far from where he started, but he did not mind it at all. Once he glanced back, he couldn't believe what he had seen. He can stand only for 2 seconds even before his body responds eventually. He leapt on the walls and began to feel his claustrophobia strengthen. A few of the chains began swinging. He was the only one inside. Who could possibly move the chain? No, it's not a gentle motion because it moved with force. He did know that there is someone observing him. Whoever it was, he or she watched him. When he came running to the opening, his heart was blasting. He did know he had to flee and get in touch with someone with regards to what he found. The question that has been running on his mind that time was who? He made his way home with sweat all over his body and was scared. Christopher started to reach his phone immediately and came into contact with the seller. He then goes on to describe what he saw in the walls, the sparkling things that made the tiny but profound tunnel lighter. The agent, from whom he bought the property, told him that they would be sending somebody to look at it. When we went to ask about the place, we were finally told that the estate had actually been home to quite a lot of mining sites. A lot of mining was done in these hills at the turn of the century, and there are a lot of little mines that are scattered across the hills, Christopher remembered. Even though he felt calmer after the call, he then went back to being tensed up. Christopher stood at the end of the conversation in his pantry. The light started to sparkle to his great shock. He attempted to manage the fear and confusion that he was feeling, however, he quickly began to breathe rapidly. The flickering lights persisted for a little while until all unexpectedly it became dark. He walked into the room where the switch was located and started turning it on and off. Nothing started happening. Instead, he started to feel a shiver that just wasn't there. Instantly a cold wind struck his face. He was still calm at that moment, so he recovered quickly from his pocket, the flashlight, turned it on, and aimed directly to his thermostat. Christopher could see that the internal temperature fell slightly, and his breath can form a cloud in front of him. How strange, he did think. He really wanted the electricity back on. He went to the breaker circuit. Perhaps a fuse just blasted and needed a fix. He wasn't thinking about anything else yet other than having the electricity running back. Since he carried the light up to the breaker, it looked like nothing was wrong. All was under control, and the primary fuse looked great. He continued to investigate the container and tried switching on and off various things. Fortunately, he was reassured that nothing really disturbing was going on. The lights should be all working when he comes back to the house, given that he did not see any problem. Faulty wiring, he said to himself while he was trying his best to be calm. He went back upstairs and took a glass of water and calmed down. However, he did hear the doorbell ring as soon as he arrived. Now, what would that be? Oh yeah, maybe it was the guy that the realtor sent to check on the tunnel. Or could it be someone else? Mr. Rudel introduced himself quickly and tried to explain that he was the guy that was sent by the realtor to check what Christopher had recently discovered in the land he just bought. He would want to see just what he had discovered and was fascinated by the material he mentioned on the phone. At the entry gate of the mine, Christopher decided to show Rudel and started telling him to take precaution to minimize harming himself. As they strolled through the wilderness peacefully, the sky looked grayish just as before a storm. He was about to go back again to where he felt strange and weird things. He have yet to confirm what it is. When they managed to reach the mine, they both ended up taking their flashlights out. This moment the glittering material became even more obvious, and the light struck them. Rudel came closer to the walls, and he couldn't hold on to his enthusiasm anymore. When Christopher did turn, it started to feel like the mine tried to tell them something. Then Rudel said somewhat disturbing to Christopher. Rudel proceeded to tell Christopher that perhaps the mine probably was a gold mine made a long time ago. As he looked at the walls, the gold remained intact. There was substantial evidence that the workers did not complete the project and left the mine. What could be the reason for that? Usually, when they know that there is gold that can be extracted, they won't stop until they were able to get it. Riddle then clarified that throughout the turn of the last century, there have been plenty of speculations about extraction, although before it, he had little knowledge of particular gold mines. Why, then, did the workers end up leaving the mine and risk leaving that much gold? There was nothing beneficial, but Christopher was interested in knowing the reality of the situation. He sought all his bravery to uncover the mine even farther, and there were two main things in his thought. 1. He might discover gold. 2. It could be haunted though too. He prepared for the adventure and went in with a battery and a flashlight in his hand. As he walked away, the blackness soon surrounded him. Initially, he could only reach the passageway by 150 feet. He did know he had to keep on going regardless of the circumstances. This is the only way he can get to the edge. The source of water he uncovered was 600 feet deep into the tunnel. It was a door. He did feel a cold chill pass his body, and his view was blurred by the water that fell on his face. He sucked and knocked his fist, even if he did know he wouldn't get any response. He unlocked the way and got his life surprise. It appears he has managed to enter an entirely different place. Whatever the external climate, the room was freezing. He tried to touch the surfaces and they felt extremely cold and rougher. His claustrophobia told him to leave the moment, but then the beam from his flashlight struck something again. There have been a lot of curled up destroyed things, but it made absolutely no sense to him. And besides, why should someone start leaving their things? He started to feel the air was becoming heavier, and his chest was under enormous pressure. Something strange was happening here and he didn't know what it could be. Christopher had seen a bed spring when he thoroughly checked the hunk. It was rusty and ripped, and all he considered necessary was the answer. Someone has continued to live there, and it doesn't seem to have hurried to stay elsewhere. When something else captured his attention, Christopher couldn't get his idea out of his head. He had seen a hideaway brick. It wasn't comforting because you actually required a shelter and a mine door? The answer is just someone was attempting to hide an important thing. Seriously wondering, he got near the hole, but there he found nothing. Just as he was trying to turn around to pull back, he discovered something else on the walls of the brick structure. He also saw white scratch marks on the walls with his flashlight to light the concrete blocks. Then when he got closer and closer he couldn't figure out what it stated. Then he can see that the walls had 4 vertical lines. It was strange, to put it mildly. He ran his hand to investigate the scratch marks. The marks were superficial, but were deep enough to be made by using only our fingers. Who was ready and willing to run away from the location? As he was thinking of it, he discovered another thing in his that he would probably see in bad dreams. He discovered more scratch marks from the other wall, however this time they were not really basic lines. No, he discovered an incomprehensible statement. He managed to snap a photograph and whipped out his camera. He could possibly use his desktop afterwards to continue investigating and decipher it even further. Suddenly, he did hear something and cold passed through his body. Somebody else was out there. He targeted his flashlight from wherever the noise happened to come. There's really nothing. He turned around and looked at the script on the surface, until he did hear the metal clash, and a chilly breeze came down on his shoulder. He started to feel as though he was just going through a cold bath as all the heat in his body was dissipating. It almost began to look like it happened to come from behind him at first, then from the front, so he couldn't tell it anymore, because it seemed from all particular directions. It grew louder, relatively close, and more frantic. He was running for his life. He started to feel cold chills walking down his spine, as well as ice in his veins as he sprinted. He couldn't help but think that there was something totally incorrect. His brain commanded him to remain, but his body kept pulling him to the opening of the mine. He sticks to his chest and collapsed when he ended up getting out. He should really have realized that all was so correct that it was incorrect. An undisturbed gold mine was almost too good to be true. After which he got himself together and then went to his house. Now he knows the reason why the laborers just left the mine, even if it had gold to offer. Everything's so silent that the noise of his footsteps does seem to absorb the air. The trees also seemed to be not rustling, almost as though they felt all the tense. He was running like a crazy man. He had to figure out what was happening. Christopher needed to find another way to know the truth behind what he just experienced. When he came to his residence, he jumped and completely closed himself in for his studies. Something peculiar was happening in the mine, and he sought to figure out his queries. He enlisted internet help and support. He knew he was going to find something about it on the internet, even just a small detail about it.